All right, back here with CBS Sports HQ college basketball analyst and co-host of the Eye on College Basketball podcast, Matt Norlander. What an absolute disaster for Auburn down the stretch there. And look, give credit to Florida. They hung in there. Appleby had a great game, but that last possession was an absolute breakdown.
It was, but you could argue they didn't even deserve to have the ball to begin with because Auburn turned Florida over on the possession before to even get to that point. The Gators had some lemon booty right there down the stretch, but they are able to get the win, and what a win that was. Let's focus on Auburn, though. You know, a couple hours earlier, the selection committee reveals its top 16. Auburn was in the number 2 spot overall behind Gonzaga, but we learned it was a razor-thin margin between Gonzaga, Auburn, and Arizona. Now, in the here and now, it's obvious. Auburn's going to drop behind Arizona in the general hierarchy. I don't think a loss like this on the road, which qualifies as a quad 1 loss, is going to, knock Auburn off the one line in the here and now, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But, man, Auburn, I got to say, I was surprised that it was this close. And credit to Mike White in Florida. We can get to the Gators in a second, Akeem, but if you're telling me Jabari Smith is going to drop 28 and be as impactful as he was, and Auburn's not going to, to be a no-show elsewhere, I'm just surprised by how this wound up going. And I guess it's credit to the Gators in this kind of spot. I mean, Florida needed this win, needed it. They got a win over Ohio State back in November in buzzer beater fashion. But other than that, UF doesn't really have a lot to hang its hat on. And here now, well, you can see what happened with Auburn, man. I still think the Tigers are going to be okay. This kind of loss, they're 2-2 now in their past 4. I'm not suddenly selling Auburn stock. Let's be very, very clear about that. Katie Johnson at 12. Alan Flanagan only with 2 points. That's what stands out to me. And then Wendell Green Jr. He's a little bit of a streaky player, but I think this was more about Florida dictating the tempo, coming up defensively huge, and then Tyree Appleby had 26.
Yeah.
Colin Castleton had 19. So they combined for a really, really great game there. And we got some noise. Some serious noise in the SEC. I told you it was going to be a spicy Saturday earlier.
Well, you're right. You did predict that. Nostradamus himself, Matt Norlander. Tyree Appleby eating good in the neighborhood. 26 points. Came with some big boy buckets. How did Florida pull this off?
Well, Appleby definitely carried him, but I actually thought this might have been a pretty big reminder of a game for Castleton, who has been overshadowed, understandably so. He hasn't been the best big in the SEC. There have been some really, really good big men, 2 of them on that Auburn roster with Walker Kessler, Jabari Smith. We've seen what Oscar Tshiebwe's been able to do with Kentucky. But Colin Castleton, going into this season, was expected to be a top 5 level kind of player. He showed up well today. This was a big spot for him and obviously this Gators team, but going up head-to-head against Walker Kessler, he certainly held his own overall. So Tyree Appleby was the star. He hit a huge 3 late to even give Florida a cushion it needed. But to your question, Akeem, it was very much about tempo. This was a Mike White kind of special in terms of, I don't want to let this game get to 70. It's going to be first to 65, 66, 67 at best kind of win. That's what it wound up being. But this also felt like a game where if it went to 41 minutes instead of 40 minutes, Auburn wins.
Like if this goes to overtime, they're winning.
I would have felt that would have been the case. I mean, Jabari Smith was just incredible. This is another game, by the way, regardless of the loss. This is like another game where it's like if you're going to argue for Smith over Chet Holmgren or Paolo Banchero, number 1 overall pick, this is the tape you're going to put in there because he was monstrous often.
Yeah, Colin Castleton outplayed Walker Kessler.
Yes.
Walker Kessler didn't have a block in this game. He had 0. Castleton had 3 blocks in this game.
Man.
Walker Kessler, they had one game in the season where he didn't have a block. It was against Alabama earlier this season. Like that's his calling card, and didn't get it done. And look, Florida stretched them out. Like we saw that down the stretch, right? I mean, we saw them stretch the floor, and Auburn tried to stay in it, and they just could not. And this, to me, like I don't want to say this is an indictment on Auburn because this is a very good basketball team. But what does it reveal to you about this Auburn team going on the road losing to Florida?
Well, I think if you're going to pick off Auburn, which, by the way, despite its high ranking, Auburn's been flirting with number 1, number 2 status for well over a month now. The metrics predictive metrics have actually been telling us that Auburn is closer to the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th best team in the country from a performance, again, predictive metrics. So, again, when this loss happens, Auburn was expected to win the game. We can't be stunned. If you turn them over and you get them a little bit erratic, you're going to have a lot of success. Now, some teams can overcome that. Auburn, to a certain extent, can, but Florida turned over the Tigers 17 times in this game. And between Katie Johnson and Wendell Green Jr., who are players that are so exciting, are so capable of making the big play, Jabari Smith is more like this. He's very steady no matter what, how the game's going. Jabari Smith is so reliable. Wendell Green Jr. and Katie Johnson, they tend to be a little more like this. And so if you can get them off kilter, you can really take advantage of what Auburn, losing track of its objective, if you will. They can be sometimes a streaky team. They've been dominant. This is Auburn's first loss in regulation this season. But credit to the Gators and Mike White for a great game plan and to turn the Tigers over 17 times, combined with Walker Kessler not registering a block. This is the nation's leading shot blocker. He is the front runner for Defensive Player of the Year. He had more blocks individually, just Walker Kessler, than all but 13 power conference teams heading into this weekend. Fairly shocking result there, but when you tell me he doesn't register a block, Hakeem, again, that also indicates really specific game preparation and execution. Mike White clearly in that staff told this team, we are not going to lose and allow Walker Kessler to get 5, 7, 9 swats in a game. He didn't. It wound up being a big thing, and they survived. Not a lot of teams are going to get out with the win against Auburn if Jabari Smith is going 25+. Florida was able to do it. What
does this win mean for the Gators? Does it spark them to a tournament bid, or they have still a whole lot of work to do to even get into the tournament?
There's still a whole lot of work to do. Now, we got to get through the weekend, see what other results we get. This is big. If you want to make the case in the immediacy of this kind of win that let's re-examine Florida's resume, does it deserve to be in? Fine, but they got more work to do right now. I mean, Florida coming into the day was 52nd in the net, and there are still a lot of opportunities in the SEC to improve the resume. At the very least right now, this registers as a high-quality win because Auburn only has 3 losses the entire season. At Arkansas, at Florida, and then they lost to UConn in double overtime on a neutral floor. So very few teams can say we have a win over a projected #1 seed. That's good for Florida. A lot more work to do, but the Gators can get there. They do have enough talent, athleticism, physicality, and defensive aptitude to get into the field. I get a sense, though, just having watched this team all season, I don't know if this is going to be the kind of win where it really jolts them and puts them on a trajectory. I feel like Florida might be destined to be in that first 4 ultimate bubble team kind of situation, and at the end of the day, we'll see. We're 22 days out from Selection Sunday. It could be very well possible that Auburn, if it stays on the 1 line, this Florida win could be the result, as we call it on the Eye on College Basketball podcast, the seed line bump. This could be the win that is the determining factor whether or not they do or don't get into the NCAA tournament.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.